Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sky above the city was a dull, muted gray, broken only by the constant hum of patrol drones slicing through the air. John Avery stood at the window of his small apartment watching the machines hover above the lifeless street. His hand curled into a fist as he saw one of them pause mid-air, scanning the block below. No one dared venture outside anymore, not unless absolutely necessary. The once vibrant life of the city had crumbled into a cold, controlled state of order, and the oppressive weight of the new government could be felt in every corner. John turned away from the window and sat down heavily at the small wooden table in the center of the room. The election loss still echoed in his mind like a festering wound. It wasn't the defeat itself that aided him. Leaders won and lost all the time. But what had followed the government that had risen to power under the leadership of Councillor Leon Morrow had crushed everything John stood for, everything he had fought to protect. Morrow had promised order and stability, but at the cost of freedom. Surveillance, control, and domination became the pillars of the new regime. He reached for the tablet on the table, his fingers trembling with restrained anger. The screen flickered to life, displaying Morrow's latest broadcast. The man's face appeared calm and collected, his voice smooth as silk. "We live in an age of peace and security," Morrow declared. "Order has been restored to our world. Crime is down. Productivity is up. The chaos of the past has been eradicated, and every citizen can now enjoy the safety that comes with technological oversight. But there are those who still cling to outdated notions of individualism and freedom, people who wish to disrupt this harmony. Rest assured, these dissidents will be dealt with swiftly and decisively." John's grip tightened on the tablet until the screen cracked under the pressure. Peace and security, he muttered bitterly, at the price of human dignity. He couldn't bear to watch any more of Morrow's propaganda. The man had transformed Earth into a sterile prison where every citizen was monitored, every action predicted, and every movement controlled by artificial intelligence. Humanity had become little more than cogs in a vast machine, all in the name of efficiency. Just then, the door to his apartment creaked open, and a familiar figure stepped inside. Sarah Bellamy, his former chief of staff, moved swiftly toward him. Her dark hair was tied back in a tight ponytail, and her sharp eyes were filled with determination. She had always been his most trusted advisor, and even now, she remained one of the few people who still believed in his vision. "John," she said, her voice low but urgent, "it's time." John looked up at her, the weight of the world etched into his face. "Time for what?" "To fight back," Sarah replied. "The underground movement is growing. We have cells in every major city now, and more people are joining every day. They've retired of living under Morrow, but tired of being told what to think and how to live." John sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You know what happens to those who resist? Morrow, SAI tracks every move we make. His drones are everywhere. Any sign of rebellion, and they'll crush it before it even begins. That's why we need you, John." Sarah pressed. "People still remember you. They remember what you stood for: freedom, dignity, human rights. You may not be president anymore, but you re-still the symbol of hope for so many. If you lead this movement, they'll follow." John stood and paced the room, his mind racing. The idea of rebellion had crossed his mind more times than he could count, but the risks were staggering. Morrow's grip on the world was ironclad, and his technological empire seemed unbeatable. But deep down, John knew that doing nothing would only lead to more suffering, more control, and more destruction of the human spirit. "What's the plan?" he asked finally. Sarah's eyes lit up with hope. "Lila has found a weakness in the system." Lila, John frowned. He hadn't seen or heard from the young tech genius since before the election. "She signed with Sean with the Underground." Now, Sarah explained she's been working from the inside, studying Morrow SAI system. And she found something, a way to hijack one of their older satellites. "It's not connected to the new network yet. If we can get access, we can broadcast a message to the entire world." "A message?" John echoed. "You think that's enough to start a revolution?" "It's just a start," Sarah said. "People need to see the truth. They need to know what's really happening, that they were not alone in wanting their freedom back. If we can reach them, we can spark something bigger." John was silent for a moment, weighing his options. He glanced out the window again, watching the drone hover lazily in the sky. The risk was immense, but so was the cost. "I'll do it," he said. "Finally, I'll make the broadcast, but we'll need more than just words." We'll need action. Something to show people that we mean business. Sarah smiled. We've got that covered. We've been targeting key infrastructure supply depots, surveillance towers, data centers. We've hit them hard, and it's starting to weaken their hold on the smaller cities. But we need the big move, the message that will rally everyone. John nodded. Then let's give them that message. The underground was a maze of tunnels and hidden rooms beneath the city, far from the prying eyes of Morrow, its drone. As John walked through the dimly lit passages, he could feel the tension in the air. Resistance fighters moved quietly, their faces set with determination. They were a mix of ordinary citizens, former soldiers, and even a few defectors from the government's own rank. Everyone was united by one common goal: to take back their world. Sarah led John deeper into the heart of the resistance operations, where Lila was hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying across the key. She was young, no older than her mid-20s, with bright, intelligent eyes that scanned data faster than most people could comprehend. Her once pristine government-issued uniform had been traded for a more rugged, practical look: dark cargo pants, a loose jacket, and a small earpiece buzzing with encrypted communication. Lila, Sarah said, bringing John forward. He says ready. Lila looked up, her expression serious but hopeful. John Avery, she said, shaking his hand. I didn't think we'd ever meet under these circumstances. Neither did I, John admitted, but we were here. Now what's the plan? Lila turned back to her terminal, pulling up a map of Earth's satellite network. This, she said, pointing to a cluster of dots on the screen. This is the key, Morrow. AI controls almost everything through these satellites: communication, surveillance, even drone coordination. But this one, she highlighted a single dot, is an older model, part of the pre-election infrastructure. It's still operational, but it hasn't been integrated into the new AI system yet. If we can access it, we can broadcast a message to the entire planet. How do we access it? John asked. That's the tricky part, Layla said, tapping her fingers against the terminal. The satellite is controlled from a high-security facility in Sector 7. It's heavily guarded, and the AI monitors every entrance and exit. But I've been working on a way to disable the local surveillance grid for a short window. It won't give us much time, but it'll be enough to get in, upload the message, and get out. John's mind raced as he considered the logistics. Breaking into a high-security government facility was no small feat, especially under the constant watch of Morrow, SAI. But if they could pull it off, the impact would be massive. The world would finally see the truth. When do we move? He asked. Tomorrow night, Layla replied. We've already got a team in place. You'll be going in with that. John nodded, a surge of adrenaline running through his veins. It had been a long time since he'd been on the front lines, but this was bigger than any political battle he'd ever fought. This was about the future of humanity. The next night, under the cover of darkness, John found himself crouched behind a supply crate just outside the high-security facility in Sector 7. The building loomed above them, a sleek monolith of steel and glass, its exterior dotted with security cameras and automated turret. Beside him, Sarah, Lila, and a small team of resistance fighters waited, their breaths shallow as they prepared for the mission. Lila was working her magic on a handheld device, bypassing the facility's surveillance systems one by one. Okay, she whispered, maybe about 5 minutes before the grid resets. Let's move. John followed the team as they slipped through the shadows, moving quickly, but silently, toward the entrance. The door slid open with a hiss as Lila hacked the control panel, and they slipped inside. The interior of the facility was cold and sterile, every surface gleaming under the harsh fluorescent light. John's heart pounded in his chest as they made their way deeper into the building, avoiding patrols and cameras as they went. Time was running out. They reached the central control room, where the satellite systems were housed. Lila immediately set to work on the terminal, her fingers flying across the keys as she accessed the satellite network. The screen flickered as she brought up the command interface. John, she said, glancing back at him, it's ready. You can make the podcast now. John stepped forward, his throat dry. This was the moment. This was the message that could change everything. He took a deep breath and began to speak. John stood in front of the terminal, his voice low and calm, yet full of conviction. His words flowed, each one carrying the weight of a man who had watched the world he loved be torn apart by greed, by control, by those who believed they knew better than the people they governed. He spoke not just to those who might hear him, but to the entire human race. Citizens of Earth, my name is John Avery. Some of you may remember me as your president. Others may see me as a man who lost his way, but I stand before you now, not as a politician, not as a leader of a fallen government, but as a human being, one who believes that every person has the right to live free, to think freely, and to make choices for themselves, without fear of being watched, controlled, or silenced. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the computer. Sarah stood nearby, her gaze fixed on John, knowing how much this moment meant to him, to all of them. This was more than a message. It was a beacon of hope, a call to arms for all those who had been crushed under the heel of Morrow's regime. The world we live in now is not the one we fought for. The promises of safety, security, and order have come at the cost of your liberty. Morrow and his government have sold you a lie that only they can protect you. But in reality, they have stripped away the very thing that makes us human, our freedom. We are not machines. We are not cogs in their system. We are people, and it's time to reclaim what is ours. John Seth's voice grew stronger as he spoke, the fire of his words echoing in the hearts of the resistance fighters gathered around him. Lila says fingers continued to fly across the keys, ensuring that the broadcast reached every corner of the planet. This was their moment, their chance to ignite the flame that would bring down the walls of oppression. I know you were scared. I know you've seen what happens to those who stand up to this regime. But I ask you now, is this the world you want to live in? A world where every thought is monitored, where every action is predicted before you even make it? A world where your children grow up in fear, never knowing what it means to be free? John paused, his eyes narrowing as he stared into the camera. I won, I stand for it. And I doubt I believe you will either. Lila gave a small nod, indicating that the broadcast was live and reaching millions of devices across the planet. The message was out there now, spreading like wildfire, and now they had to ensure the fire kept burning. Join us, John said, his voice steady. Join the movement. Fight back against the tyranny of control. Together, we can tear down the walls that divide us and build a world where every person, every child can live with dignity and freedom. This is our moment. This is our dawn. The screen flickered off as John stepped back, his heart still pounding in his chest. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of what they had just done hung heavily in the air. Let's get out of here, Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. The team moved quickly, retracing their steps through the facility. John's thoughts were racing, but he forced himself to focus on the task at hand. The broadcast was just the beginning. They still had a long fight ahead of them, and every second counted. As they slipped through the exit and back into the shadows, the sound of approaching drones cut through the night air. Lila cursed under her breath. We're already on to us. Move, Sarah urged, pulling John forward. They sprinted through the alleyways, dodging the beams of the drones, searchlights as they weaved through the labyrinthine street. The plan had been to retreat to a safe house, but it was clear now that the government wasn't going to let them slip away so easily. Suddenly, the sharp whine of a drone engine echoed closer, and John felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He turned just in time to see the metallic shape of a drone swooping down toward them, its sensors locking onto their group. Down, John yelled, diving to the ground. Just as the drone fired a volley of shots, bullets tore through the air, pinging off the walls and scattering debris across the street. Sarah fired back with a laser pistol, striking the drone and sending it spiraling out of control. Ult to the ground in a burst of sparks and flame. We were not far from the safe house. Lila shouted, her voice strained as she picked herself up. We can still make it. They pushed forward, hearts pounding until they reached a narrow doorway at the edge of the sector. Lila punched in a code, and the door slid open just in time for them to slip inside. The door sealed shut behind them, muffling the sounds of the drones that now circled the area. Inside, the air was thick with tension. John leaned against the wall, catching his breath. That was close. Too close, Sarah muttered, wiping sweat from her brow. She turned to Lila. Did it work? Did the broadcast go through? Lila nodded, her face illuminated by the glow of her handheld device. It sounded out there. People are already responding. We've got reports coming in from all over uprisings, protests, people refusing to comply with the AI as commands. It's spreading. John felt a surge of hope, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what was to come. The government wouldn't take this lying down. Morrow would unleash everything he had to stamp out the rebellion before it could gain too much momentum. We need to regroup, John said. We've lit the spark, but now we need to make sure the fire keeps burning. Sarah nodded in agreement. IVNB already contacted the other resistance cells. They were ready to move, but we were going to need more than just protest. We need to take down the AI itself, or Morrow will always have the upper hand. John's mind raced as he considered their next move. Taking down the AI was no small feat. It was the backbone of Morrow, San regime, controlling everything from surveillance to military operation. But if they could destroy it, even just temporarily, it would cripple the government's ability to maintain control. We need to hit the AI control hub. John said finally it's in the only way. Lila's eyes widened. The hub, that SA suicide mission, it's in the most heavily guarded facility on the planet. Even if we get past the drones and the security systems, the AI will predict our every move. I know, John said grimly, but it's our only shot. If we don't take it down, this rebellion will be crushed before it even begins. Sarah looked at him, her expression hard but resolute. Then we'll do it, but we'll need a plan. We'll need it fast. In the days that followed, the resistance worked tirelessly to prepare for the assault on the AI hub. Every resource they had was funneled into the mission. Every operative briefed on their role. John knew that failure wasn't an option. Too many lives were on the line. Too much had already been sacrificed. The day of the attack arrived, and John found himself once again in the thick of it, leading a small team toward the AI hub. The facility was a fortress, surrounded by layers of defense drones, automated turrets, even human soldiers who had sworn their loyalty to Morrow's Sen regime. The team moved quickly and quietly, using every trick they had learned from years of fighting in the shadow. They bypassed the outer defenses, disabling drones and slipping through security checkpoints without raising alarm. But as they neared the central core of the facility, the resistance began to encounter heavier resistance. John ducked behind a barricade as gunfire erupted around them. He signaled to Sarah and Lila, who were pinned down on the other side of the hallway. We were running out of time, he shouted over the noise. We were almost there. Lila called back, just a little farther. The team pressed forward, pushing through the final line of defense until they reached the heart of the facility, the AI control room. Inside, a massive server tower loomed over them, its lights blinking rhythmically as it processed the endless streams of data that powered Morrow's empire. This is it, John said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Let's take it down. Lila moved to the terminal, her fingers flying across the keys as she began the shutdown sequence. The room was filled with the hum of machinery and the distant sound of alarms blaring throughout the facility. Come on, Lila muttered under her breath as she worked. Suddenly, the lights in the control room flickered, and the server tower began to power down. The hum of the AI's processors grew quieter, and for a moment John dared to hope that they had succeeded. But then a sharp voice crackled over the facility speakers. John Avery, I knew you wouldn't stay hidden forever. It was Morrow. John's heart sank as he realized they had been found out. The door to the control room slid open, and a squad of soldiers marched in, their weapons trained on the resistance fighter. Don, T-move, one of the soldiers barked. John raised his hands, his mind racing as he tried to figure out a way out of this. But before he could act, Morrow's voice echoed again through the room. You've lost, Avery. This rebellion ends here. John clenched his fists, his eyes narrowing. No, he thought, it doesn't end here.